Is it going? Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Odinic School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that you've taken the time to come and listen to me talk for a little bit. Hold on, I got it. Put my goober. There, is that better? I think it looks cleaner. I am pooped. I've just been moving boxes, and so I'm taking a break. Kids are gone, wife is working, so the stars have kind of aligned to do a video. And I'm going to, when you're working really hard, you don't want anything sweet. You know, you can't go wrong with just a good old-fashioned Budweiser. Just because you don't want something cold, but you don't want like drink a pop or something. And this is a pop for all intents and purposes, but it is an alcoholic beverage. So here's to you, my good friends. While we're on the subject, before we get into the main topic, take a good look at the symbol here on the front. This is called multi-dimensional symbology. We've talked about this before a couple of times, where you have symbols that are kind of buried. You have to look at it kind of abstractly in order to kind of pull the symbol out of it. But this is very clearly a Saturnian symbol. You have an eye here, which makes the eye thing here. You got the rays coming off of it. You have a fasces over here on the sides. You got the alpha and the beta, the male and the female here inside the temple. Iris. There's just a lot going on here. In fact, actually, master classes in symbology. Actually, there was something I noticed. Where was that? There was 9 pointed stars somewhere. Oh, right here. You can't really see it on the can. You could, if you go look it up online, you'll be able to scroll in. But you have 9 pointed spears going all the way around going around the outer part of the eye here. You're going to be hard pressed to find something that is more occult than alcohol and tobacco companies. Their dark occult is all over those brands. It doesn't matter if it's a fancy beer or a cheapie or a cigar or a cigarette or whatever. I mean, the dark occult is all over it. Because even though alcohol loosens you up and makes it so you could talk more, it's very communal, it is still the easiest way to control somebody. So something that used to be sacred is now just, given to everybody to keep them drunk and happy. It's really good if you don't want something sweet. It's not so good if you want to go out and have a beer. Like, oh, let's go have a beer. It's not very good for that. So I want to talk today about Skathi. I'm probably mispronouncing that because I'm an American trying to say Old Norse words. The anglicized version of that is Skadi. S-K-A-D-I, right? That D, that little backwards looking D thing with a little hatch mark on the top of it, that actually makes the th sound, like a TH. So if you see it, so that's why you have Uthen, because that's the way that was originally used, was the TH, has that sound. So Skadi in the anglicized version is actually Scathie in the original, whatchamacallit thing. And Skathi suffers from the same problem that a great number of, actually, if we're being honest, almost all the Norse goddesses have this problem, where they're criminally misunderstood and forgotten. I just got an email this morning or last night from a gentleman by the name of Nemo. I got your email, buddy. I'm going to respond. Trust me. He kind of mentioned this too, where it's like a lot of these goddesses, they just kind of are mentioned once and never referred to again. So he had some questions about a different goddess, but all the Norse goddesses kind of have this issue where it's like they're there, but so much of our religion and our faith has been forgotten or destroyed, or it was destroyed and then it was forgotten, something like that. That it was just gone, right? Their stories are just gone. But there is a lot of things about them that we could piece together based on what the documents are talking about when they are mentioned. And there's a few things that are really mentioned about Skathi. She is a huntress. She uses a bow. She is fond of animals. She's a hunt. Okay, let me try this again because I think I'm getting ahead of myself. She's a huntress, right? She's a hunter. She has skis. She uses a bow. She tends to, one YouTube channel even went so far as to say that she is the kind of the queen of night. And I would happen to agree with this. I don't even remember. I'd shout out the channel if I could remember which one it was. I just don't remember now. Which I would definitely agree. And there's a few reasons for this. Let me get... Please, have a drink with me. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just bear with me here. My friend Alex would say this is part of the aesthetic. You come to Bear's channel to talk about philosophy and, wait around for 10 minutes while he lights a cigar. Cigar has kind of a funny taste to it. Okay. We'll light another one. One that doesn't taste like shit. So, goddesses in general. Let's just start there. Goddesses in general represent the sacred feminine, obviously. And when we have, so feminine typically equals truth, because the sacred feminine represents knowledge that is unquantifiable. Really, you can't write it on a piece of paper and crunch the numbers and then come up with a good answer. That's what the sacred feminine represents. Which is why we have beings like Thoth, who are married to Ma'at. Thoth is a wisdom god. Ma'at is a truth goddess, right? Wisdom and truth are the two sides of the mind. Wisdom is linear, concrete thinking. Truth is more abstract and difficult to pinpoint, right? It's like you can know that your mother loves you because of her hug, but if you try to quantify that, you're just not going to get anywhere, right? It just doesn't matter. And so women always take on, so there's two sides. You have the sacred masculine and you have the sacred feminine. Sacred masculine being I'm using my left hand because I'm representing the left side, the left hemisphere of your mind. Sacred feminine is the right hemisphere. You've probably heard the term right brain, left brain before. Okay, this already smells better. Tastes wonderful. What the hell is going on with this one? Normally these are like some of the best of the cheap cigars, but that one wasn't the best of nothing. Ugh. So there's that part of it, right? There's the part of the sacred feminine, the sacred feminine. I completely lost my train of thought. You could tell I don't edit these because when I lose my train of thought, it's just like freaking gone. Well, let's just step back for a second because I think this will work a lot better if we attack it a different way. When we're talking about stars, we have the story that is always told, that comes back to us over and over again in 1,000 different forms, in 1,000 different ways, is the death, rebirth of the dying god, represented by the sun. You can't really see it because it's overcast right now, but represented by the sun. And different beings, different gods, take turns, just like actors, take turns playing the role of the sun god. His life, his murder, his descent into the underworld, his birth out of the night, and his rebirth into the east. And so this comes back over and over and over again with this theme that is told over and over and over again. So if you're part of the Baldric cult, the cult of Balder, your dying god myth will be the death and resurrection of Balder. If you're an Odinist like myself, your dying god myth is going to be of Odin on the world tree. If you're a Freemason, your story is going to be that of Hiram Abiff, the Master Mason. And it's not just a man that does this, because it's actually, gender isn't necessarily, when we're talking about mythology, it's not only boys, only girls kind of thing. You know, like Ishtar very famously, also called Inanna, very famously has a dying god myth of her own where she's hung on the fishhook. You know, so it's not like it's this man only thing. Women go on lots of adventures. But when we're talking about mental gender, and we're talking about gender when in terms of the mysteries, we're talking about it's more about, let's say, the direction of the flow of electricity. It's almost more in terms of something like this, where a birthing is considered male. So I mean that's why it's always a male child that's born, right? In sun god mythology. But that's not always the case. Like there's a famous example, I think it was Athena, who was born out of the mind of Zeus. Like Zeus has this horrible headache. He can't explain why, and then so his doctor or whoever comes and plants an axe right in the middle of his head. Well, I don't know how many of you have used an axe before, but you know, when you hit something with an axe and you pull it out, you have that, you know, that womb. You have that womb shape that comes out. So like his third eye has been opened up, and who comes out but Athena, this fully grown woman set for war. You know, she has armor and a spear, and you know, she has all these masculine attributes, being feminine. And it has nothing to do, the masculine attributes have nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. It has everything to do with what Athena is doing, what the character in the story is doing. If it's doing something, the paraphernalia that the person is wearing is going to give you a clue on what this thing is supposed to represent. Well, Athena turns out to be very, very similar to Freya in the Norse pantheon. Similar attitude, similar war-going type behavior, a lot of masculine symbology. Doesn't mean that she's a man. It means that she has masculine symbology, meaning that if we're talking about electricity, she's the anode, right? She's the part of the part of the battery that goes out from the battery. The sacred feminine is always the part that receives energy in, right? So we have to pay very close attention to what is not just what the story is trying to say, because you can look at any story and just say, oh, look, it's a fable. It's saying, you know, be good to your friends, don't lie, think things through, this kind of thing. But the implements in your hand are equally important. Like if you spent any time looking at a tarot card, you'll know right away what I'm talking about. It's like you have people holding things, and there's different numerical amounts of certain things, whether it's a cup or a sword or, that sort of thing. What people are doing and how they interact with the world is a key part in unlocking their mystery. So with the sacred feminine, we have like again, I said, like there's this special story of the sun. It goes about its cycles. It has a day cycle and a year cycle and a great year cycle. And each god, like in like cogs on a clock, represents and rules certain parts of time, certain parts of sky, certain parts of the year. So the underworld, with this in mind, is always represented by the feminine. And you'll say, what are you trying to say? You're trying to say that women are killers and all this kind of stuff? No, what I'm saying is the dark, feminine womb, right, represents the underworld. It represents the place where you see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? The birthing sequence, right? That's what she represents. She represents the nighttime. You know, so like in the Jesus story, for example, Jesus was born in a major in the wee hours of the morning from a virgin. Why was he born of a virgin in the wee hours of the morning? Because the night sky has no partner. The night sky doesn't have a partner. You might say daytime. Well, the daytime comes from her child, the sun. Right. And then so the creator of all things, the highest, most hidden all-father, is the Father. But, well, we don't, like Jesus says, you don't see the Father. No one comes to the Father except through me. You don't know my Father, is what Jesus said. And so in the wee hours in the morning, Jesus is born out of the night, because Jesus is the sun. And so in the wee hours of the morning, he's born in the west, out of the darkness, in the wee hours of the morning. So Skathi, so this is a long-winded way of saying that Skathi is a night goddess. And we know this, there's a few interesting pieces to this. Particularly, excuse me. So we going back to what she does, or the things that she has. Like I said at the beginning, she has a bow, she has skis, she's a hunter, so she's doing something, right? There's something that she's doing. So in the Norse mystery school system, the bow of Skathi is the night sky. It's the dome of the sky. When Skathi bends her bow, it's the night sky. The arrow that she uses, pointy objects. It's fitting that this is on fire, actually. Pointy objects, spears, swords, arrows, you know, with this triangle shape, always represents it represents the mind, for one, but most importantly, the shining tip up here at the top is the created thing. It's the sun, right? It's the sun up in the sky. It represents the sun, which is why, like in the Masonic pyramid, you know, you have the all-seeing eye that's like floating up above. Actually, I think that's the sun right there. You can't see it. Right there at the tip. See the sun? Right there. There you go. The bow that she looses, the sun travels throughout its orbit. And you say, okay, well, why wintertime? Well, there's a few reasons for this. If we're talking about the year, the wheel of the year, wintertime, Yule hangs out at the bottom part of the year, way down here at the bottom. Up here at the top is the top part of the year where the sun is at its highest point, right? It's at its most highest power. And then down here at the bottom is Yule, where the sun dies and it goes into the underworld. And then it is born and come back up. So you could almost say that Skathie's bow is not to give the Scorpios too much credit here, but you could say that the constellation of Scorpio represents her bow, because it actually looks like a bow, and it's the same constellation as Maui's fishhook, for example. Go look at a star map and go look at Scorpio, and you'll see right away that it looks like a scorpion, or it looks like a hook, or a bent bow, or any of these things, right? But she not only she represents the bottom part of the year, but she also represents the night itself. Excuse me. Because what do you see at night? You see stars. You see the Milky Way. The Milky Way is the snowy path that Skathi travels on her hunt for the sun. Right? For her hunt for the sun. She finds the day and launches her arrow and makes the sun rise. Where is it? Where is it? Kind of over there. Makes the sun rise in the morning. Right. It's the death of the underworld. This kind of symbology has been lost. And it's really frustrating, because the thing that how do you put it? Trying to figure out how to put it into words. Because the old way of looking at symbols it's like a lost language. And people not only don't know that the language exists, but they will deny it when you try and point it out to somebody. They think we're lying or just making this shit up or whatever. And that's not good. But this stuff is important. Like, there's not as much, I guess what I'm trying to say is this. There's not as much that has been lost as we think that there has been. We think that because Skathi isn't mentioned very often, or that Freya or Frigg or any of these other goddesses, Sif, we think because they're not mentioned that as often as some of the other gods, that the wisdom that they contain is just gone. Well, and that's really simply not the case. If you understand that you're looking at a book of symbols, it's not a narrative, it's a book of symbols. And symbols are a language. And if you learn how to read the language, you could read the book. You can read the book. Because all of these symbols, all their different planes of causality, from the most mundane to the most lofty are all painted up there in the sky. And the stars and the sun and the movements of the planets and the constellations all tell a really important story. Right? There's a poem. It's called a mystery poem, but really what it is it's a dirge. It's a lament for the souls of man who've been lost in the underworld. And there's a number of verses in there, you know, like one that I quote often is, "Come to me, he calls, come to me, my lover, and dance your dance in the valley of bones, where dance you will forever." But in this poem, there are a number of things that are mentioned. There are the 12 sons of Odin. There are the 9 masters, right? So, and there's a bunch more, but you know the point is, so the 12 sons of Odin, the 12 apostles. The 12 helpers of Saint Nicholas. Let's see. I think that's right. Maybe I'm getting that one wrong. So the 12 comes up. The 12 tribes of Israel. So we're talking about, when 12 shows up, we know we're talking about the zodiac, right? The 9 noble masters. The 9 sages. Sometimes called the 12 sleeping sages. I'm sorry. Sometimes called the 9 sleeping sages. 9, not 12. 9 are the 12 major constellations that make up the Norse pantheon. Orion and just to name a couple. There's Orion, who's often represented as Odin. There's the Great Bear, which is also known as Odin's Wain. There are my teacher talked about the bear people, and the bear people come from the Ursa Major constellation. The Norse people, I keep saying Norse, but the Norwegian, Northern Germanic tribes, Greater Germanic tribes, are one of the few in the world. Us, the Russian pantheon, which comes from this is exactly the same pantheon, basically, with different names. The Norse, the northern people of Europe, the Native Americans in North America particularly, they all have bear people myths. But whenever I use my teacher as a source, it's one of those believe me or don't kind of things, right? I'm not making a truth statement. I'm just saying something that I've been told. I have never known my teacher to be wrong on anything. There's a few times when I thought I might have gotten him, but I never get him. I never do. He's too smart. It's like Orion, that Ursa Major. Let's see, you have Cassiopeia, which is called one of Odin's ravens. It looks like the M constellation, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. Anyway, there's 9 of them up in the sky, and they encompass, most of them are in the northern hemisphere, because that's where the Norse lived, and their mythology was based on those stars. But there are a few, like Orion is in this, technically a southern hemisphere constellation. He travels because he's a hunter. He moves up and down the sky, depending on the time of year. And speaking of Skathi, the huntress, this is part of the hunter side of the thing. She's chasing the sun. So in the summertime, she goes on her hunt, right? Orion, Sirius. Sirius is the Odin star, right? They go away. Odin leaves because he's never home. He goes on his journey, and then the underworld stars show up. Well, the king is away. The king being Odin, who represents the sun. So when the king goes away, the forces of night, the sacred feminine, come back into play, and the world gets cold and dark and all this stuff. It doesn't mean there's not good stuff going on right now in the wintertime, but the king is away, right? And when the king comes back, the forces of night go back to their, they just kind of switch places. So Skathi basically takes on the same, she's almost symbolically identical to the Egyptian god Nut, N-U-T. Nut was called the goddess of lapis lazuli. Is that how you pronounce it? Lapis lazuli? Lapis lazuli? Something like that. Jesus sometimes was said to have a face like flint. The night sky, right? These dark stones. Lapis lazuli looks like the night sky. Sometimes, so Nut, female birthing goddesses, these beings. What was I going to say? Oh, that's right. Okay, now I'm back on track. So these goddesses are sometimes called the Lady of Night, the Whispering Lady, the Veiled Lady, the Black Madonna. She's Mary in Christian mysticism. If you go back and look at a lot of the medieval art of her, she is oftentimes in her mother goddess aspect. She is wearing a cloak of stars, or she's standing under a sky of stars, or something along those lines, because she represents the portal basically to a new dimension, and the sun comes out of her, right, into the new day. The sun being like there over my left shoulder. Sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. But there's a lot of, it's tricky doing these videos because there's a lot of moving parts, and I don't rehearse. I don't edit. I used to do a lot more edits than I do now. I don't do almost any edits at all. I do this off the cuff because I want to be able to give as close of an experience as the mysteries were meant to be experienced, which is taught orally, right? The mysteries were always taught orally because you were expected to hold it all in your head. And the problem is that if you write something down, it could be stolen. So it was always told in story, and it was always told in symbology. So that way, one, it makes it so it's easier to remember, which is important if you have to remember it. And two, once the story is told again, the speaker might know the meaning of the symbols, but the uninitiated don't. So it works as a really clever way of keeping secrets. So it's true that the Catholic Church and the powers that be wanted to burn all the books, so to speak. But they left a lot of things out because of this mechanism, because they were like, well, what do you want to, what harm is it in just telling a story? There's nothing wrong here. So the stories were preserved. And one of the things that people, they give Snorri Sturluson, which is where we get a lot of the stories from. He was an occultist. He was actually a heavy-duty occultist. He was adopted by his godfather, who was very wealthy and had a huge library. And so he got taught the mysteries from the very beginning. And then so he was able to take the Norse mysteries and write them down as they were not as they were supposed to be, but in the way that that kept the important symbols kind of together, so they didn't really just all fall apart. And he did a pretty good job. People give him a lot of crap because it appears that he had just made stuff up, but I'm not totally sold on that idea. I don't think he just made stuff up. I think that he did his best to compile things in a way that kept all the pieces together. But so going back to what I was saying is that if you know the sacred story of the sun, if you know the dying god myth and what it represents, everything else really is easily decipherable. Everything else is pretty easily, you could put the pieces together pretty easily. It's not some huge mystery on what it means, because you could read the language, you understand the symbols. And so and it takes a long time, initiation takes a long time, and one of the reasons it takes so long is because you have to take the time to learn the language, and it really is a language, and a lot of it is subjective. Some things mean lots of different things at once. A serpent, for example, means lots of things at once. Well, actually, it doesn't. It just appears to. The serpent really, just as a way of an example, appears to be super complicated because he's good and he's bad, and he's a deceiver and he's a savior, and he's the devil and he's not, and be as wise as serpents, but kill the serpent because it's evil, and just all this stuff, right? Well, a serpent really just represents energy movement. It represents energy movement. So, like you have the serpent and the kundalini, which is that energy center that goes up the spinal cord. It's called a serpent. The serpent that on the caduceus in the staff of Hermes, the double serpent and the hydra and all these things always represent energy transfer. So what makes the serpent a good guy or a bad guy, in quotes, just depends on what the energy is being used for, right? Is the serpent being used as a weapon? Energy out? Is it like protecting something? The world serpent, Jormungandr, who surrounds the world, right? He keeps it all kind of together. And the world falls apart when he lets go of his tail and Ragnarok begins. It's like the thing that kind of keeps all the order together. When it lets go, all of a sudden, everything just kind of goes to shit. So I feel really bad because I feel like I've been kind of scattered in this video. And I don't mean to be as scattered as I am. But the point remains is that Skathi, though we know very little about her in terms of narrative, we know a lot about her just by reading her symbols. And we could piece together, because we know her symbols, we could kind of piece together what she's doing, what kind of goddess she is, and why she's important. Right? She represents the dark womb, right? The night sky. Her bow is the night sky. Her arrow is the tip of the sun. She looses her arrow and the sun rises and sets back down here in the west. Ugh. Back here. You see it? Right, these are important symbols. Well, because we know that her arrow was the sun, because we know what the pointy object represents, right? We know about the dome of the sky, because the dome of the sky is often represented as a bow, a curved object, a basin, a water basin. A bow is that curved shape, just like a boat is that curved shape. It's all the same. It always comes back over and over and over and over and over again. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah, I'm looking here, like now I'm looking at my Budweiser drink here. Okay. You got the horn, you got the sun here, and you have an eye. This whole thing is an eye. And you have the horns coming off of it. The horned eye. The eye of dualism, and dualism is the state of darkness, checkerboard floor, underworld, slavery, that sort of thing. All right, so you could look at that and you could read the symbol. Right, it's not some hidden thing anymore if you know how to read the symbols. And so Skathi, being who she is, now suddenly, we're about 45 minutes to an hour in, and now we know a hell of a lot more about Skathi than we did at the beginning, because we just simply looked at the symbols. Now, when you go outside at night and you look up at the stars and you see the dome of the sky and the Milky Way and all of that, you could look and say, I understand who the goddess is. I understand the magnetism, not the magnetism, I get teased for using this word a lot, so I don't want to use it, but I'm going to use it. Profundity, right? Just how big is a goddess? Well, she's the entirety of the night sky and all that it contains. We're talking about something that is huge, not little, huge. It's big, right? And she's one of the forgotten ones, right? You have to start thinking about like, what does Thor and Tyr and Odin represent, because it's so, if she's a forgotten goddess and all she represents is the profundity of the night sky, well, shit, you know, these other gods must be equally as enormous. Not something you could just easily just know suddenly. You know, you have to like dedicate your entire life to understanding it. Cool stuff. It's really cool stuff, and I wish that I really wish that people would take more time to learn it and to understand it and to because there's a truth here, right? There's a truth that just is pre-existent, that lives and breathes creation, and no one asks the right questions because everyone already believes that they know the answers. And if you take the time to say, like my friend Jacob often says, you know, teach me the truth no matter what the cost. Like really teach me the truth. Like, I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to be wrong on everything. Please teach it to me so that I don't have to live in ignorance anymore, and I can know what I'm supposed to actually do with my life. And not just my life, because it's not really, you're not really doing something because you want to like just serve a god for the sake of serving a god. It's so that you can everything you gain, you get to keep, basically. The knowledge you gain here, you get to keep. And the things you acquire, you don't. But the things you know, you do. And acquiring knowledge is the only way to set yourself free. And it's not, you have to be real careful, because I'm not saying knowledge in the sense that I'm going to memorize a list of things, which is how most people see knowledge, right? I'm very knowledgeable about the moon. Well, yeah, but what good is that, right? You could recite an encyclopedia to me, but it doesn't really do anything. It's like those of you who are married or been in relationships, it's like the difference between having a relationship with your wife or your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend or your parents or whatever, any kind of relationship you want to talk about. Instead of that, you just read a bullet point list of things about them, right? A lot of people know a lot about Henry VIII. But how many people really know Henry VIII? We can make some certain guesses about his personality. You know, we could read about other people who were alive at the time and who talked about Henry VIII. But you don't really know him. And when we're talking about the gods, and we're talking about whatever this thing is, this profundity that is in charge of this universe, this churning, brilliant, extravagant, ineffable, inconceivable, undefinable, unnameable thing that is just this, you can't even, there's not even words for it, but there's this thing that exists. You know, if you are Chinese, maybe you call it the Tao, you know, the ebb and flow of the Tao, or whatever it is. And this thing, it exists. And it's telling us that it exists in 1,000 ways. And we're more concerned with winning arguments and who's the president than we are about, you know, this thing that is, God, you can't even say it. You know, there's just not words that exist that make it even possible to say it. We're so wrapped up in the dumbest possible shit that we're missing out on not just the things that set us free, but the things that elevate us out of everything. You know, it's a pain in the butt. And so I guess that's my spiel. We're at almost an hour, it looks like. My cigar's almost gone. Even if you want my shitty one, you could be more than welcome to take it. It's really disappointing. But, you know, when you buy cheap cigars, that's just the way it is. We live in a beautiful, wonderful world. And we live in just this garden of a planet that is untouchable in terms of beauty and wonder, and we treat it like if it's made by the hands of the gods. All of this is made by the hands of the gods. We better be damn sure that we are treating it as holy. This whole thing that we're talking about is all holy. It's holy science. It's this undescribable thing. And I wish I had the words to express what I'm trying to say, because I don't have words to express what I'm trying to say. Our gods are real. They're tangible. They're way bigger than you thought they were. They represent more than you think they do. Their words and actions are ever present. There's not some tale from some far gone land. If you want to see a god, look at the sun. If you want to see a god, look at the earth. If you want to see a god, look at the sky. If you want to see the 12 masters, look at the zodiac, right? These are not put there on accident. This is real. This is real. And the stuff we're talking about here is not just, when we're talking about the mysteries, we're not talking about common religion here. We're talking about the religion of the gods. We're talking about the real thing, right? Our true inheritance, the thing that was given to us to hold and to cherish and to understand. And we've thrown it away. And that's not okay. It's not okay what we've done. And we really need to be mindful of that. I wish that I could communicate how it feels in here, right? This feeling, this undescribable, ineffable, undefinable thing. This I can't. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. This was the Odinic School of Mysteries, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.